Hi, I'm Christal, and I've been learning the drums for quite a long time by now. Even after I started teaching professionally, the learning process is something that never actually stops. If you've been learning the drums for any length of time, you'll know that it can be quite a frustrating instrument. Today, I just wanted to share with you guys some tips on how you can learn the drums better. And notice that I said learn better and not necessarily play better. There are plenty of other videos on YouTube that go into what you can play and how you can improve your technical skills. This is not one of those videos, but I think as a drum teacher, the learning process is just as interesting, if not more interesting to me than the actual technical process of what we're playing. So I hope you guys will find this interesting. Let's jump right into it. Here are 10 tips for learning the drums better. Tip number 1 is to measure yourself against yourself from the past and not anyone else. You would think this would be a little bit obvious, and maybe it has been stated quite often on various platforms. But personally, in my early years of drumming, there were so many times that I wanted to give up because I felt that I was too old to be good at drums. And looking back now, that was a very foolish thing to say because I was in my late teens or early 20s. But, we would just go down those rabbit holes where we start scrolling through videos on the internet and there's some 5-year-old kid playing stuff that we can't do. And maybe I still can't do some of the things that these kids are playing. But you know what? It really doesn't matter. The only important person that you want to outdo is your past self. And as long as you're comparing yourself to yourself and not anyone else, you'll be able to move forward. The second tip is for you to set process-oriented goals. I'm cheating slightly on this one because there's a sort of underlying tip, which is you need to set goals for yourself. There's no way you're going to be able to compare yourself to your past self if you haven't actually set goals and tracked your progress. So assuming that you are in the habit of setting goals, I want you to look at the type of goals you're setting. Are they all event-oriented goals, or do you have some process-oriented goals in there? An event-oriented goal is something that is very concrete and you might or might not succeed at it. You're not directly in control of whether you're going to be able to accomplish that goal. For instance, if your goal is to play single strokes at 180 beats per minute by the end of the month, and you're currently at 110 maximum, that could be a little bit unrealistic. Even if your goal is to learn a song, you might or might not be able to execute it at 100% within your prescribed time frame. A process-oriented goal, on the other hand, is something that has to do with how much time you're putting in towards your goals. So a process-oriented goal in the realm of building single-stroke speed might be something like, my goal is to spend 15 minutes, 4 days a week, for a month, working only on my single strokes with a metronome. So that is something that you can very easily succeed at, and by doing that, you're also giving yourself the good habit of practicing consistently. So always remember to set process-oriented goals and not just event-oriented ones. Tip number 3 is don't skip steps in your practice. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of times when we're learning a song or a groove or a fill, what we're looking at is really the end product. If you learn a particular beat that another drummer played in the song, you're learning something that is the culmination of all of that drummer's practice of rudiments, technique, rhythms they've internalized, songs they've listened to, and you're skipping all of that and going straight to the final product. Now, that can work if you just want to play one song, but you will expand your vocabulary so much more if you really break that down and look for the underlying concepts within that and work on those technical areas that will really expand your creativity in music as well. A lot of times when I teach students songs, I tell them that honestly, I don't care if they can play that one song or not, but what I do care about is that they go through the process of breaking down things that they can't do, learning how to build them up until they can perform it, understanding the structure of the song, understanding how the different parts connect to each other. And all that to me is more meaningful than just learning the song itself, because that's just one song. If you can explore the ideas that were used within it and take those concepts out of it, you can play a lot more than just one song. Tip number 4 is to match your expectations to your effort. A lot of times in drumming, we get frustrated when we can't execute something, but if you really think about it, it's probably because you haven't put in enough time really understanding and breaking down that concept, slowing it down, figuring it out in its component parts before putting it together. And honestly, I just find that there's no reason to be frustrated if we know and we're aware that we haven't put in that much time yet. I think it makes about as much sense as asking a 10-year-old why they can't pass their university entrance examinations. That's exactly why you can't play that thing that you're trying to play. You haven't gone through all the steps to get there yet. So once you realize that, you can actually just be a little bit more at peace with yourself and just be aware that you will need to put in a certain amount of effort to get to where you want to go. And each of us will be able to commit a different amount of time into our drumming depending on how high of a priority it is in our life. And there's nothing wrong if you can only practice for half an hour a week, or you can practice half an hour every single day of the week. It's just that you need to be realistic in what you're going to expect out of that amount of practice time if that's all you put into it. Tip number 5 is, I don't know if I should really call this a tip, but I think it's an important thing to be aware of, especially as someone who is relatively new to drumming. And that is that learning something new is not always fun. At some point, it can be mentally draining, and you just want to prepare yourself for when that honeymoon phase of the relationship with your instrument is over. Just like in romantic relationships at the beginning, a lot of times everything seems to be going fine and dandy, but at some point of time, we're gonna need to sit down and really talk about whether there is a good foundation for that relationship to continue. It's not always the most pleasant thing to have to do, but you still have to do it. Otherwise, your relationship is just going to be very surface level, and everyone around you will be able to see it, or in the case of drumming, hear it. So just be aware of that as you're learning that you will come to that stage in your drumming where you really need to knuckle down and put in the work. It doesn't mean that you're out of love with the instrument, and it will be worth it. Tip number 6 is that it's okay to feel uncomfortable. I'm pretty sure you'll hear this from other drummers as well, and that is the idea that it's actually an exciting thing after a certain point when you sit down at the kit and you try something that you can think of but you're unable to do, because once you've gone through the whole process of knowing how to break something down and work it up to speed and incorporate it into your vocabulary, the moment of encountering something that makes you feel uncomfortable is actually something positive, because now you have a new idea that you can work at until it becomes more natural and it becomes a new idea or vocabulary piece that you can add to your arsenal of drumming. So definitely embrace the moments where you feel uncomfortable, especially when you're in the practice room, because that means you're challenging your limits and you're trying something new rather than just staying in your comfort zone and rehearsing the things that you can already do, because that's not going to expand your vocabulary at all. Tip number 7. I'm sure you guys have heard of this particular phrase, and that is, practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. But I would also like to suggest to you guys that perfection is not always the goal in drumming. That's not to say it's never the goal. There are definitely things that I believe you should aim for excellence, if not near perfection. And those are things like your technique and your sense of time. If you practice with bad technique, you're just getting better at bad technique, and we don't want that. If you're playing with bad timing, you're just not in time. There's nothing good about that. But in some other areas, a little bit of messiness can actually help your creativity. So this is something that I personally struggled with a lot when I started out drumming, because I felt like everything I played needed to be clean and I needed to know what I was doing. If I didn't know what was happening, I wouldn't play it, even in the practice room. Now, this logic applies to the stage because you don't want to be guessing at what you're playing on the stage and you don't want to be playing sloppy there. But when you're practicing, a little bit of messiness can actually help your creativity to flow a bit better, because when you're playing too clean in the practice room, it usually means you're doing stuff that you're already comfortable with. Whereas if you allow yourself a little bit of leeway for some messiness, it's a lot easier to come up with new ideas and you can subsequently clean those up. Another way of looking at this could be to allow yourself to make mistakes while you're playing, because sometimes those can be happy accidents. A lot of times in class, if my students are learning a groove or fill from a song and they're practicing it, and maybe at some point they hit the wrong drum or play a different rhythm, I'll just stop them for a moment and be like, okay, I heard that. That wasn't what you were trying to do, but it was pretty cool. So let's just take a minute and try and repeat that so-called mistake that you made and figure out what makes it different from the original thing you played. So sometimes playing those mistakes can actually just increase your vocabulary, and it's not always a bad thing. Tip number 8. It's okay to move on, but remember to come back later. The context of this is in learning new drumming concepts. So learning things in drums can be challenging because we don't actually really have an end goal. You might learn a particular rudiment, but how fast should you take that rudiment to? How many improvised fills or grooves should you make out of that pattern? There's no one who's going to tell you that what you're doing is enough or not enough. So a lot of times it can be easy to either leave a topic half-baked, moving on too early, and then abandoning it, or we can get stuck on one thing. Like if you just learn doubles and you just want to get your doubles really clean and you end up doing nothing but doubles for a whole year. It's maybe not the worst thing to do, but that's not going to give you a balanced education in drumming either. There will come a point in whatever topic that you've learned where your learning curve is going to kind of taper off and you'll find yourself not improving as much or as rapidly as you used to when you first learned the concept. That usually is a sign that it is time to move on. But if this concept has not been yet fully incorporated into your vocabulary, it's just going to come back into a rotation of topics you're working on. So you might be working on concept A for a while, you get that to a certain level, move on to concept B, get that to a certain level, move on to concept C, get that to a certain level, and then go all the way back to A and start working on that some more. And a lot of times, we never actually stop that cycle. I'm still working on my singles and my doubles and paradiddles and accents, and those are things that I have been playing since year 1 of my drumming. There's always another level you can bring those concepts to. If you're a Christian, this is a little bit like the Bible. The Bible doesn't change, the verses are the same, you read it the first time and it has a certain meaning to you, but maybe sometime later a preacher preaches from that passage and explains it a different way, it has a different meaning. You go through some things in your life and you read that scripture again, it has another meaning to you entirely. So that's a bit of a weird analogy, but I hope you get what I mean with drums. The first time you learn a concept in drumming, it's going to mean a certain thing to you, but as you learn to apply it, as you learn other concepts, and you experience different musical situations, you'll learn to apply that same concept in a completely different way, depending on which stage of your journey you're at. So don't abandon those ideas, but also don't get stuck on them for too long. Tip number 9, remember that music transcends technique, and technique is a means to an end, it's not the end in itself. This one is more for you intermediate drummers who have got to the stage where you are starting to analyze how your hands are moving, how your feet are moving, and learning new techniques. It can get pretty overwhelming at times, and sometimes we forget that the whole reason why we're working on technique is so that we can play music better. So the time where you should be looking into technique is when you find that you are limited or held back by your current technique and you're unable to say what you want to say in the music context that you want to be able to play in. So technique is not bad at all. I love geeking out about technique and working on that kind of stuff and understanding the mechanics of how our limbs and the sticks work. But the point really is to be a good musician first and always let that inform how far you want to delve into your technical and technique studies. Final tip for you guys is pretty much related to the last one, and that is to remember that drums involve music too. Drums are a musical instrument, and in my personal opinion, the drums really shine the most when they are supporting other members of a band, other instruments, and there's other facets to the music. So the final tip to you is listen widely and listen actively. Listen out to different genres of music for the different kinds of drum beats and drumming there is in them, but also listen to the other instruments that make up the music. And the reason for that is when you're listening to a drum part, the drummer in that band created that part to go with the rest of the music based on everything else that was in the song. There were no drums in the song until someone came up with them. And there's a reason for that particular beat or that particular feel, and that reason has to do with everything else that is not drums. So many times students of drumming get so focused on learning drum parts that they forget to pay attention to music as a whole. And that is really the biggest tip I can give for you guys, which will help you learn drums better and also be a better musician. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you watched through the whole thing, thank you very much. I think it turned out a little bit longer than I anticipated, and maybe I should have broken it up into smaller sections. I don't know. Maybe I'll revisit some of these at a later point when I'm feeling more coherent. In any case, if you have other tips on how anyone could be better at learning the drums, leave them in the comment section below. One last bonus tip for you guys: be patient with yourself and enjoy the process. It will get better as you put in the time, and I hope you guys will keep drumming and keep improving. Take care, see you next time. That's weird. Did I already say that?